What I have noticed over the decades is that political pressure, both from anti-hunters and from politicians, man, we've had just a heck of a winter kill, and our populations are down by 80%. Now, on that last one, Edward, you're wrong. Most of them these days can be, and I just love that sound. Sorry, Ron, I think you're wrong. The most important thing about getting a bullet to a target from a rifle is the no hunting. We have shut it down. We don't like fish and game. We don't like what they're doing. We don't like their management policies. Therefore, we're shutting down all hunting. I think it's the most elegant, slimmest, sleekest, beautiful falling block. But the old original with more practice will beat any marketing BS all day. Prove me wrong. Well, how to handle 6.5 Creedmoor fanboys. And is the 300 PRC too powerful for whitetails? And if it is, why isn't the 300 WSM? Somebody wants to know, and we're going to see if we can answer it on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. Let's start off with one of our patrons. Mark and I have been writing back and forth about his choices for cartridges and stuff, and he's playing around with some interesting wildcats and stuff. So he wrote, say there for a while, it seemed like the 284 wildcats were getting really popular, but now it seems like they've sort of died out. And I wrote back and said, yeah, Mark, such things come and go. Well, the bulk of shooters and hunters stick with factory cartridges. It has always struck me as odd that major ammo makers are so slow to accept and legitimize these wildcats. For instance, it took Remington something like 40 years before they brought out that 22 Varminter as the 22-250 Remington. And then the 25 Needner cartridge as the 25-06. I don't know why Winchester didn't release a 6.5 by 284 Winchester. Norma did it and changed the name of the 6.5 284 Norma. So I think Winchester missed an opportunity there. But anyway, now that these long high BC bullets are all the rage, it just seems like everyone is creating slight variations on the older cartridges to make the new PRCs and similar cartridges. And it's just because of those twist rates. Mark wrote back and said, the 284 in both the 6mm and 6.5mm sizes are much better than the Creedmoor. I've got to the point where I'm starting to hate everything and anything that has a Creedmoor in its name, especially when someone tells me that they can kill an elk at 700 yards with their 6.5 Creedmoor. But yet an old 30-30 or a 35 Remington or a 32 Special, while those aren't even capable of shooting anything past 75 yards, makes me so mad. I'm not 100% sure, but I think any of those others are better at 200 yards than the Creedmoor is at 700 yards. So I wrote back and I said, hey, Mark, I feel your pain. I feel your pain, but chill, man. This is just humans being humans. It's the same in every aspect of life. People like to think that their tools, their things define them. My dog's better than your dog. I choose the better boots, the better car, the better golf ball, so you're an idiot and I'm superior. The internet and social media make this grandstanding one-upmanship easy because you can show off and you can denigrate the other guy without having to face him. Makes the accuser feel better about himself. But it is no reflection on you or the tools that you've chosen. The important thing is that we don't conflate the cartridges with their advocates or detractors. The 6.5 Creedmoor performance doesn't improve or diminish just because a braggart or a bore misrepresents it. The 35 Remington doesn't bounce off a deer at 150 yards just because Rufus Loudmouth condemned it. It is natural to feel offended by these characters, but it's best to ignore them and assess cartridge, bullet, and rifle performance on their actual performance. Drop, deflection, retained energy, accuracy, and terminal performance. Cheers, my friend, and chin up. All right, those are some good ones. That was a fun exchange. Now, this is from another patron, Caleb, and he says, Ron, first I want to thank you for the wonderful information and entertainment you give out to hunters, sharpshooters, and conservationists. Patreon is new to me, so I may be asking this in the wrong place. Apologies if so, but I have a question about acquiring a rifle that is kind of a novelty piece for me. I want a falling block, but I don't know where or how to find one. Is scouring the internet and every gun store in the state my best option? I'm open to any suggestions on calibers, but versatility is key for me. I intend to use it for hogs, deer, and coyotes. I don't mind if there is fur damage to the coyotes, and I don't have the need to take any shots more than 250 to maybe 300 yards. So what do you suggest? And how do I find it? And how do I know what I want? Thanks, and God bless, Ron. Well, Caleb, I wrote back and I said, thanks heartily for your support, Caleb. For falling blocks, you really have several options. There's a Winchester Model 1885, a Ruger number 1, Park West Arms SD-10, and Uberti 1885 Courtney stalking rifle. Currently, Park West, formerly Dakota Arms, offers the most caliber options. I have one of those in 25-06 Remington, and I'm waiting for another one to be finished in 7x57 Mauser. I suggest that you Google the others and study them and their options. Now, Ruger has been built in the most chamberings over the years, but lately they've been quite limited. This year they're offering a 6.5 Creedmoor 270 Rigby, and that's the same as a 757 Mauser. And then the 257 Weatherby Magnum. But to find them, you have to go to Lipsy's. Lipsy's is a distributor, and they specify they want a certain chambering and style of these Ruger number 1s. Heavy barrel, light barrel, short barrel, different things like that. And then Lipsy distributes those to different gun shops and stuff. I continued then. I think, Caleb, that you'll do well with any of the 24 calibers or the 7x57. The 257 Weatherby is a smoker, and I love it, but it's a bit too fast for some hunters. Ammo is expensive too, unless you hand load. I think that a Park West in 270 Winchester would be quite versatile, if it's a bit much for coyotes. 6mm Creedmoor or 243 Winchester, those would be lighter options, ideal for coyotes. There's enough options really to drive one batty. Obviously, I decided on that 25-06 Remington in my Dakota Model 10 long ago, based pretty much on your criteria. So you might want to consider that one too. I think that Ruger number 1 is probably the one you'll get at the best price. So good luck with that, Caleb. It's not everybody who wants a falling block, but boy, those of us who've shot them and handled them, I really love them. I sure do mine. It's just everything from the look of it to the slickness of that action and that big massive breech block that slides down when you open it. They're just a lot of fun, and they're really quite accurate too. All right, now, Sarah, these are comments from some of the listeners and readers that we get, and this is Kev talking about twist rate. He says there's a paradigm shift in twist rate. 1 to 3 twist is unheard of, yet there's a secret weapon in it. The 1 in 3 twist rate retains more energy. We no longer have to rely solely on grain weight and velocity. I wrote back to Kev and I said, Kevin, I think you might have gotten some inaccurate or at least incomplete information. A faster twist rate can't really make a bullet retain more energy to an appreciable degree. Bullet mass and velocity determine its kinetic energy. So mass and velocity at the time of impact determines the energy delivered to the target. A given dose of powder will create a given quantity of pressure, which can be absorbed by the projectile in 2 velocities, lateral velocity and rotational. The faster the rifling twist, the faster the spin, but the slower the downrange velocity. If you want to get nitpicky, note that air drag slows downrange velocity more quickly than it does spin velocity. So technically, at extended ranges, a faster spinning bullet should have a tiny bit more retained energy. Whether that can be converted into effective work is the question. Temporary wound channel is elastic tissue, lungs and muscles and everything, is much less traumatic and less permanent than primary wound channel, which is physical ripping and tearing from the projectile's contact. So unless a faster spinning bullet expands more or flies apart to spin shrapnel to tear vital organs, increased killing effect is questionable. However, as more and more 1 in 3 twist rate 8.6 blackouts take more game, a clearer picture of high spin effects should emerge. I suspect that with pedal-style expansion bullets like the Barnes X and the Cutting Edge and the Hammer, you might be proved right. So I think the jury is still out on that, but that 8.6 blackout is getting a lot of hype on that 1-in-3 twist rate. It just does seem to do a lot of lateral spinning damage. But as I say, if that's just beyond what the bullet is literally touching, the elastic tissues, I think, can absorb that and come back without permanent damage. But hey, I don't have the absolute answer on it, but there's not a huge paradigm shift just because of that twist rate, I don't think. Let me know what you guys think about that, especially if you've had experience, because I have heard many times that 1-in-3 twist rate on the bullets shot out of that 8.6 blackout really do seem to do some pretty dramatic damage. All right, let's see what Trevor has to say. Hi, Ron. I know you probably won't see this. No, I see it, Trevor. But I'm a father of 2 and about to be 3 out here in Indiana, and my sons both gather up after bedtime story to watch your videos with me. Just wanted to say thank you for the memories with my boys. RSO is the best. Wow, I love that, Trevor. Thanks so much for that. And hi to your boys. I really appreciate you guys paying some attention here. That's lots of fun. This is from Robert. Hi, Ron. Any exterior ballistics expert out there, answer this for me. Does the bullet turn into the wind or does it turn with the wind? If the wind is blowing to the left, will the bullet turn to the left or to the right? I've read both, and now I don't know what to believe. Boy, I'm with you, Robert. I went through the same thing. Oh, for years I tried to figure this stuff out, and I would get all these contradictory answers. But the correct answer, best as I can determine, and this makes sense, is that the bullet's nose turns slightly into the wind. Think of it as a weather vane. And the weather vane isn't moving forward like the bullet is, but if the wind blows its tail and it tips its nose into the wind, right? So your bullet has a huge wind right at its nose because of its velocity. But then there's the additional right angle wind velocity that wants to tip it, and it tips its nose into the wind. It weather vanes into the wind. I think that's the best way to think about it to make it make sense. Weather vaning into the wind. But at the same time, it's deflecting to the other side. So if it's right angle wind from the right, tips into that wind, but deflects off to the left. Complicated stuff. And it's kind of amazing that they ever figured it out, given the speed of a bullet in flight, how you ever notice what's going on 200-300 yards down range. But it sounds like they've pretty much figured it out, and that seems to be what's happening. If anyone has a better description of that or a more accurate one, boy, we'd sure love to hear it. But there's a lot more going on with wind deflection than what we usually refer to it as wind drift, but it's not drifting. The bullet does not just sort of ride the wind over there. It's got other things going on that give it a new vector direction, and it, because of its velocity, and it's moving farther than the wind would blow it. And one way that they've tested this is to, drop the same bullet at the same time you shoot it. So you fire your bullet downrange at 3,000 feet a second or whatever in a wind, and you drop that same bullet at precisely the same time. They both leave the muzzle, let's say, at the same time. The bullet that drops the same distance that your fired bullet would drop at a specific distance does not deflect in the wind the same amount. So it's that spinning bullet with its vectors and velocities and stuff that makes a difference. Worth looking into, guys. It's lots of fun to try to figure it out. Okay, here's Nelson. Ron, in one of your recent episodes, you stated that modern firearms are mostly immune from firing pin breakage during dry firing. There is at least one exception that I know of, if it's a modern reproduction of an old Winchester lever rifle that has not had the firing pin redesigned, it is prone to breakage. I have a reproduction Model 92, and I've had this happen. Seems to me Winchester made reproductions, or at least some of them, that have had this problem fixed. So guys, if Nelson is right here, you might want to check. Your lever action Model 92 shoots the short cartridges. Might have an issue, so double check that. And as I said in the times that I've mentioned dry firing, most center fire rifles these days are okay to dry fire. But boy, if you're at all worried about it, don't take a chance. Either buy some snap caps for it or consult the manufacturer to find out. And then there's a follow-up here from Edward. He says that the CZ P07 pistol is not recommended to be dry fired. It can damage a roll pin. And also he says 22 rimfires are not made to be dry fired, exclamation point. Now on that last one, Edward, you're wrong. Most of them these days can be dry fired, but again, there are a few exceptions. See, the issue with the rimfire is that the firing pin strikes that rimfire and squeezes it against the edge of the breech. So if there's no little metal rim of a cartridge right there, that firing pin can slam against the hard steel of the breech and damage. So if they don't have it set up so that they limit the reach of that firing pin, that it does not slam into the edge, only hits what would amount to a little bit thicker surface area on the priming edge of the cartridge, then you could have issues. But most of them have fixed that as well. All right, let's see. What does Tyson have to say here? He says, I'm wrong about something. Sorry, Ron, I think you're wrong. The most important thing about getting a bullet to a target from a rifle is the actual ability of the shooter. Practice, 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 and more practice will beat any marketing BS all day. Prove me wrong. Well, Tyson, I certainly can't prove you wrong about the importance of a good shooter, but I would have to point this out, and I'm sure you'll understand it. The best shooter in the world can't hit the target if his rifle isn't accurate enough to put the bullet there. So if your rifle is scattering shots 3-4 inches up and down and left and right and everything else, I don't care how good you are, you're not going to hit your target. It is a combination of a good shooter and a good bullet, good cartridge, good rifle, all of it. You've got to have accurate tools before you can accurately use those tools. Does that make sense? I think he'll agree with that one. All right, this is from Billy. Billy, Ron, is it possible for you to describe and possibly describe, identify, explain construction purposes, distance recommendations, weight, pros and cons, construction recommendations for bullets? Not the best cartridge, but bullet recommendations, please. Ooh, boy, Billy. I can't do it all because there are so many of them out there, but I can give them basic categories. You can have a fairly frangible bullet made out of different materials, but usually it's a soft lead core and a thin gilding metal jacket, and they are designed to break apart, especially at high velocities. Obviously, the higher the velocity, the more stress is on that bullet. And then there are cup and core bullets, which are pretty much the same thing, but they could have a little bit thicker jacket, and they could have a little bit harder lead. They put some tin in it to harden it. And those are kind of your traditional bullets in the middle of the 20th century, before the Nosler partition in 1948 came out. That was to fix some of the issues we were having with these cup and core bullets. But they still work pretty well at velocities, impact velocities around 2,800 feet per second and less. Broadside test shots and stuff for deer, they're pretty effective. But you get up much faster than that, and they start to break apart when you don't necessarily want them to. You want a bullet to stay together for deeper penetration. So they started fixing that by a number of ways. One is to mechanically bond the two metals, the jacket with the lead. It's almost like welding the two together. Those are called bonded bullets, and they help retain more mass for more penetration. You still get a lot of expansion from those, and a lot of times you'll break up a few pieces too, but pretty good little option. And the other one is that partition that I mentioned earlier, where you have the transverse wall through the length of the bullet. Let's see, I got a bullet here. Guys, you aren't just listening, you'll have to imagine this. I'm holding up a bullet, and if I put a wall through the center of it, I'm going to isolate the shank lead from the nose lead. So that helps protect the lead in the shank to maintain more weight. Even if your nose lead gets broken up or lost or you wrote it away, you've still got some of your lead in the back to continue driving. And then you can change the thickness of that wall and the jacket like they do with the Swift A-frame bullet to increase that weight retention and penetration even more. Then there are options like all monolithic bullets. All copper bullets are all the rage right now, and I think they're going to become more and more commonly used because they really are perfecting the performance of those things. They're lacking a little bit in density because copper is a lighter specific gravity than lead. So of the same size bullet, your lead bullet's going to be heavier, going to have a higher BC. So you have to stretch those copper bullets out pretty darn long, and that's why you need the fast twist barrels to stabilize those. But in performance, boy, they really retain weight because there's no two parts to break apart in any way. And then there are various hybrids. A lot of times you'll have an all copper bullet, but they'll hollow out the nose and put a little bit of lead in there. It may or may not be bonded. So you're going to get different performance characteristics there. That's about the extent of it. There are various hybrids and variations on those themes. But as you go up the scale in making that bullet both harder and or more mechanically locked together, any kind of design that helps it maintain more of its mass, that's what you want for deeper penetration on bigger animals or when you're shooting bullets at higher impact velocities. So I hope that fixes it up for you, Billy. This is from God's Country Shooting. Hi, Ron. I love your content. On this episode, number 346, there was a discussion on the difficulty of finding hunting land. It's no different here in Southwest Virginia. We may have the beautiful Appalachian Mountains, but there's still only so much hunting land. I would like to make about 3 points. 1, hunting is a skill and it's a heritage that is to be taught. Passing the knowledge down to the next generation, along with the stories, friendships, and the camaraderie that go with it, onto the next generation will help hunting continue. We also teach our children, grandchildren, and sometimes young people that have no mentor, so many important lessons like morals and ethics, personal growth, and the fragility of life. That makes spending the time making connections and finding hunting land worthwhile. Second point, God put man in charge of his creation and with that responsibility to manage it. As you know, it is the hunters that do that job. I believe that insurance companies are quietly applauding us for saving them money as well. By that, he means insurance companies hate to pay out for crashes with deer. And in the East, in some places, there are so many deer that the damage from striking deer at night with your car is so high that the insurance companies actually lobby for more hunting, taking out more deer, saves them a bunch of money. Number 3, hunting in bow season, early muzzleloader season, or the late season can be a great way to tag your favorite game. And lastly, getting to know farmers, game wardens, and local sporting goods stores can be a great way to get contacts for finding hunting grounds. A lot of my hunting land came by those means, especially if you are willing to break the ice by shooting varmints out there where coyotes should protect their calves and such, and help them with filling crop damage tags if farmers have attained to protect their livelihood from an overabundance of game like whitetails. Thanks for your work. Well, those are some good ideas, God's Country. I think you're spot on, and I'm sure a lot of other people have similar thoughts and ideas, and it's always worked pretty well. You know, it really comes down to public relations. Your public relations, and your public might only be 1 or 2 landowners, but yeah, you get out there and make friends with folks and show that you care and hunt responsibly, and you'll get a place, and then you can bring out the young people and pass on the traditions. It's pretty much what hunters have been doing for the last thousands of years. It's just a little more challenging these days with the populations and the urban areas and fewer hunting grounds out there. So it's a bit more of a challenge, but certainly worth the effort. Now, this is Ooga Booga. I like that one, Ooga Booga. I work at a gun store. I had a customer tell me that the 300 PRC is overkill for deer hunting in the Carolinas. For context, though, he said that he hunts with a 300 WSM. Well, my ballistics calculator shows that his preferred hunting load was within 400 foot-pounds of energy as the 300 PRC. So can you please do a video comparing the PRC family to other cartridges that they typically don't get compared to? Thanks, and keep up the good videos. Yeah. Okay. So the guy is saying, boy, that 300 PRC is just way too powerful for deer. I use a 300 WSM. They're both 30 calibers. They're both magnums. They both throw the same bullets and pretty close to the same velocity. So they're putting the same amount of energy into the animal, the same bullet weight. How can there be that much of a difference? Yeah. But I don't have time right now, obviously, to make all these comparisons, but you did give me the idea here. So I might do that. There are enough long magnums, standard magnums like the 300 Win Mag, which fits the 30-06 class of cartridges, and then the short mags. I think there are enough of those now that it might be worth doing a video just to sort of explain why would you pick a short fat magnum over a standard length over a magnum length like the 300 PRC and 300 Weatherby Magnum and those kinds of things. So we might do that sometime. Thanks for that suggestion. Now let's see what the gang's got here for us. All right, here is someone from Wisconsin named George. Ron, I'd like to know if you intend to interview other gun YouTubers. I think your presentations with Hickok 45 and Backfire were refreshing. It's a wonderful idea. Yeah, George, we get a lot of good comments on that, and we are looking into doing some more of those. Betsy is trying to reach a few folks who have been suggested by folks like you, but we haven't been able to run them down yet. But we've got 2 or 3 of them on the schedule coming up here soon. So stay tuned. We are going to try to do a few more of those. Now, this is this is Bruce from Indiana. I'm in the market for an X-Bolt in 300 Win Mag. The rifling twist is listed at 1 in 8. Well, the rifle I currently have is a 1 in 10, and I load my own ammo. I'm using Nosler Partition 180 grain with 72 grains of powder. And what issues would I have in shooting this in the 1 in 8 twist barrel? The rifle that I'm looking at has a 26-inch barrel. Thanks in advance for the reply. Okay, Bruce. So you've got a 300 Win Mag now. You want to get a new one, but the new one is twisted faster than your old one. So you've got your loads worked up for the old one, and now you're worried about how they're going to perform in the new one. Well, first of all, the 26-inch barrel really doesn't have anything to do with it. Twist rate is the degree of spin that the bullet gets in a certain length of travel. So a 1 in 10 twist would mean in 10 inches of barrel, that would be a 1 complete twist to spin that bullet 1 time. So you step up to 8, you're going to increase your pressure just a tiny bit more because there's more of a grip or a friction with the wall being a little steeper when that bullet hits it and spins. But I don't think it's enough to worry about unless you are at the absolute ragged edge of too much pressure with your current loads. That would be my only concern. So you might just back off a grain of powder from your loads. Maybe back off 2, though, to get started, because you don't know how much friction that particular barrel might have. You know, you go from rifle to rifle, barrel to barrel with the same cartridge, and there can be significant differences in the pressure in those barrels from the same load, and this includes factory loads, because of a tighter or looser chamber or throat or lead or rifling, lots of little things. They're tiny little dimensional changes, but they do make a difference. This is why factory ammunition is usually loaded to a little bit safer levels than the top end. You know, the standard maximum average chamber pressure might be 65,000 PSI, but to be safe, knowing that there's differences in these rifles and such, the ammo companies might only load it to 63,000 PSI or something. So hand loaders can very carefully work their way up to the factory standards and get their full performance that way. But it's always smart to start a little bit lower and gradually work your way up. Other than that, I don't think you'll have any trouble with that. So good luck with your new rifle. Hope you find a good load that works well in it. Now let's go to Nebraska, where David has something to say. Oh, it's like he's going pronghorn hunting. I'll be pronghorn hunting for the first time this fall in western Nebraska. Woohoo, that'll be fun. Beautiful country out there. I would like to use my favorite rifle. It's a Howa 1500 chambered for the 270 Winchester. The rifle shoots half-inch groups at 100 yards. Whoa, that's nice and accurate, my friend. I'm using hand loads tipped with 130 grain Hornady SST bullets, and I'm very comfortable shooting it out to 300 yards. I would like to use the same rifle, but I don't feel I need this much power to bring down a pronghorn. I would like to go with a lighter bullet so that I could push it faster and flatter. Most of the lighter bullets I am seeing in the caliber are marketed as varmint bullets or target bullets. Would it be okay to use one of these lighter bullets on a pronghorn, considering that they're not engineered for taking game? Or should I look to heavier bullets in 270 designed for medium-sized game, or even go with a completely different caliber? Thanks so much, David. Boy, David, I think you're fretting about something that you really don't need to. I think you're just right on with this 130 grain SST load. It's a fairly soft bullet, but it's fairly long, sleek, has a high BC. It's the classic in the 270, 130 grain bullet. Absolutely the classic. So I would just stick with that and not worry about anything. You're going to do just great with it. Pronghorns are small animals for big game. 100 pounds, maybe 120, soaking wet. But they can be fairly tough if you don't hit them in the right spot. But I have never seen a decent shot in the vitals on a pronghorn that didn't bring it down pretty quickly. They'll sometimes make a mad dash because obviously they still have an oxygenated brain that's still functioning, even if their pulmonary system is broken down. So they'll last for several seconds, and a pronghorn can cover a lot of ground in a few seconds, but it's generally wide open ground and you'll see what's going on. It's not a problem getting those, but a lot of folks will shoot pronghorn with a 243, 25-06, 100 grain bullets, 75 grain bullets. A lot of folks will use 22s. I've used 22 250 on them. As I say, it's not that difficult to bring one down. I think the last one I took was with a 270 bullet, but it was fired from the 6.8 Western, and it was a heavier than normal bullet. It wasn't 130 grain because that 6.8 Western is designed for the longer high BC, faster twist and all that. So I was reaching out there. I think it was a 320-yard shot and put it right where it was supposed to go. And I think I was using the 170 grain bullet on that one. But really wouldn't have mattered if I had been using a 70 grain bullet from some other caliber. So I think you're spot on with that one, David. Good luck. I think you're going to love it. That pronghorn hunting is really fun. And don't make the mistake of driving around for these pronghorns and saying, oh, they're running. Get out of your vehicle, glass, and hike over that beautiful country and crest over slowly and glass. Listen for them snorting. During the rut, the bucks will snort, wheeze or something. It sounds like, and I just love that sound. You get out in that Western country when it's a dead calm morning. It's absolutely beautiful. You can hear that sound for hundreds and hundreds of yards. And you'll also see these bucks getting on high ridge tops to show off. They're sort of patrolling and saying, this is my territory, and showing off to the other bucks. And of course, they're scanning, looking for does. So it's just so much fun to see all of that action. And then stalk close and make your shot. You're going to love it. Makes me want to go along with you. This is Stefan or Steven from Colorado. Ron, I enjoy listening to your podcast. You have talked a lot about the advantage of all copper bullets, and you mentioned the hammers a lot. Well, I just bought some 160 grain TTSX 30 caliber bullets to load in my 300 Win Mag. Just wondering if you had experience with these. Oh, yes, I have extensive experience with the Barnes TTSX bullets, and they are phenomenal and consistent. Wonderfully accurate, not high pressured. When they put those relief bands around the Barnes, the original Barnes X bullet was just solid shank all the way. And then started putting relief bands on it and gave that copper some area to get pushed into while it was obturating down the barrel. And they've perfected it. They're just so accurate in almost every rifle. So I think you're going to do just great with that. And I think you've picked, just about the perfect weight in a all copper bullet like that for the 300. I think you're probably optimal right there. You're going to be able to push it really fast. And that 168 grain TTSX will penetrate as well as, if not better, than traditional 180 grain lead core bullets. So I think you're going to have great success with that. Now in Ohio, we have James who says, Ron, I used to occasionally watch your videos because they would pop up in the mix while I was researching cartridges. So I assumed you were just a cartridge guy. But after listening to your conversation with Matt Ranella, I began to see how much more you had to offer, and I loved your message. That being said, I have two questions. With winter kill this year, I have seen some states reduce tag numbers and season structures for some species, and even saw a campaign in Wyoming for people to cut their tags and send them into the Fish and Game without going hunting. Are there any ideas or programs around like that you've heard about? Also, I'm only a couple of years into this hunting thing, so I've been going through finding out that who I am as a hunter. I've been finding out who I am as a hunter. I started out listening to everyone who told me I needed to learn to shoot a long way out. But after my experiences so far, I realize that's just not what I want. Given that bullet BC isn't really a factor inside of 300 yards, and I intend to attempt to stay under 200 yards, I've been drawn to the 30-06, and in areas that I think I can get closer, the 45-70, even though I have things like a 6.5 Creedmoor, 243 Winchester, and I'm about to start working with a 7 Rem mag. What cartridge would you reach for if your goal was to keep your shots under that 300-yard mark? Well, let's answer that one first. If you're shooting only out to 300 yards, pretty much any modern bottlenecked cartridge is going to work just fine for you. Most of them, as I did in a previous video, most of the modern cartridges will shoot within a couple of inches of drop of one another, and deflection, wind deflection with the similar bullets, bullet shapes and such. They'll all be within a couple of inches, maybe 3 out to 300 yards. So it's not really a huge difference. The energy on target can be a bigger difference out there, but the trajectories are awfully similar. So 270, 243, 25-06, 7 Rem mag, 300 mags, all of them are just right there in that ballpark. So I would say balance what you think is enough bullet weight for penetration and energy on target and stuff. Balance that against perceived recoil. Every rifle is going to have a certain degree of recoil. It's simply a product of physics. For every action, there's an opposite reaction kind of thing. If you want to keep your rifle light and handy, go with a lighter bullet in a smaller caliber. Is one way to look at it. But gosh, yeah, out to 300 for deer, just about anything's going to work for you. I think you're right on with what you already have. The 7 Rem mag, now, if you want to step up to that, you are actually going to be ready to reach out and have a deadly terminal effect out to 400 or 500 yards. But if you don't want to shoot that far, why mess with the 7 Rem mag? Get a 7mm 08. Got the same bullets with a lot less recoil, and that's going to be plenty good enough for 300-yard shots. Great little round right there. And similarly, the 757 Mauser and the 284 Winchester. But the 708, I think it's easier to find a lot more ammunition for it if you're not a hand loader. So now, what about that first question you were talking about? Reduced tag numbers, winter kill, and all the rest. What I have noticed over the decades is that hunters are always wanting to pick fights with fish and game agencies because everybody thinks that he has a better idea. And sometimes we do. But I've worked for some fish and game agencies and I've known the personnel, and nearly all of them do have the animal welfare in mind. They're concerned about hunters and hunter access and success and all the rest. But at the heart of it all, their mission is to protect the resource and divide it equitably among the public. And that's why we have closed seasons and limited seasons and bag limits and tags and all these things. So the biologists are supposed to go out and assess the situation and say, man, we've had just a heck of a winter kill and our populations are down by 80%. We had better cut the tag sales by 80% or more to get the herd built up again. And we better shut off the doe harvest. Sometimes when the populations are too high, the landowners are complaining about animal damage. They're getting in the winter haystacks and they're eating all of their crops and whatnot. So they increase the sale of doe tags to reduce the population. So they're trying to keep this rough balance, which is a heck of a challenge because you've got to consider weather and fires and drought and predators and then hunters and how successful they are or aren't. They might say, well, on average, we have a 60% hunter success rate, but one season you might have a big blizzard come through and shut everything down for the first 3 days of the season. And then half the hunters have used up their vacation time and had to go home without even hunting. So the harvest goes way down. Crazy things like this all get thrown into the mix. So they have to be fairly conservative in what they're doing. But I think the more important thing to remember is regardless how they screw up or we screw up in saying that we ought to do it this way, or I'm going to shut down my property and not let anybody hunt because I don't think we've got enough deer and et cetera, doesn't really seem to make much difference. I know an area where there are big signs up that say all of the landowners in this particular part of the county, or maybe it's the whole county, but the signs are saying that no hunting. We have shut it down. We don't like fish and game. We don't like what they're doing. We don't like their management policies. Therefore, we're shutting down all hunting and we're going to let the game populations come back. Those signs have been up I've been seeing those things for like 6-7 years. It doesn't seem to have changed anything. So I just don't think we all individually should be second guessing. Certainly, we want to watch what's going on with our our public officials. But remember, we are hiring these biologists, and they are trained. They have to meet certain specifications. They can't just pop out of the woodwork like they did back in the 20s and 30s because they were the governor's friend, or they married his daughter or something, so they would get the position as game warden or chief of the department or something. It's all based on science now. This is proven biology, and lots of study and resources go into these programs. It doesn't mean they can't mess up. They're human like everyone else. But as I said, most of the ones that I've known and interacted and worked with were concerned about the resource first, and then the hunters and the equitable distribution of the resource for those folks to use. And they were doing as good a job as they could with, consider this now, of course, political pressure, both from landowners, from anti-hunters, from hunters, and from politicians. I mean, they're getting it from all sides. And the biologists' recommendations don't necessarily get adhered to. They usually have a commission, politically appointed a lot of times, but there's a certain commission over this, and they take the information from everyone. You go to the monthly meeting of the Fish and Game Commission, and they'll hear from the biologists and get their recommendations, and then they'll hear from the farmers and the landowners and ranchers, and they'll get their complaints and recommendations, and then they'll hear from the senators and the governor, and they go, oh my gosh, what do we do? And they try to come up with a compromise that pleases everyone and usually pleases no one. But the good news is wildlife keeps coming back. We have done a remarkable job. You think back to, before you were around to think, but back in the turn of the 19th century, around 1900, that's when our wildlife populations were really in the toilet, because there had been market hunting not too many years before that, unrestricted stuff, bison, passenger pigeons, and all this stuff. And then we shut everything down, and it was a struggle because people it was not traditional to have you told you can't hunt or there's a closed season. So we had a lot of poaching and law breaking. But in general, by the 1940s, we had brought back, or started to really bring back, most of the game species. And then in the late 20th century, we just saw remarkable increases in total numbers. For a while they were saying there were more whitetail deer in North America now than when Columbus landed in 1492. And the elk population has really bounced back after the 1970s or so. We're now seeing cougars moving into the eastern states. They're just saturated out here in the Mountain West. And there's so much game now that wolves have been able to be reintroduced. And of course, they're now reducing the game populations, and we're all howling about that. But the fact that they can actually make it out there because there's enough big game to eat, hunters are responsible for that. We brought back the pronghorn and the elk and the moose and the deer and all the prey animals that wolves need. And yet we get lambasted for being concerned about the wolves eating all the game, when we were the ones who made it possible for the wolves to come back because we provided that food for them. So it's crazy. There's just all sorts of nutty things going on out there. I think it behooves all of us to really think about these things and not knee-jerk reaction. As soon as you see a dead animal that a coyote's feeding on, you think, well, we need to kill all the coyotes and we'll have more deer. The fallacy of that argument has been proven over and over again. Yes, there is a balance that needs to be handled, but thinking that we know all the answer from some superficial observations just isn't going to work. But hey, I appreciate your concern about that, and thanks for the support, James. I really appreciate that. Now let's see what Marcus has to say. Marcus is coming from Sweden, where they might have a little bit different take on all of this. Nope, he's looking for a single shot. Thanks for all your videos. I'm searching for a single shot. Do you have any experience with these? Which should I consider? Didn't I just talk about single shot falling blocks? Okay, single shots are not just falling blocks. You can have a bolt action single shot. There's no magazine in it. You can get a break action single shot, which are pretty popular in Europe. And they can be wonderfully accurate and light and simple. And then the falling block single shot. I can't think of any others. I suppose you could block the magazine on a lever action and have a lever action single shot. But these are the three: the falling block, the break action, and the bolt action. Very few single shot bolt actions anymore. So I think you're looking at either the break action or the falling block. So I mentioned earlier the falling blocks. So if you're listening to this episode, you will have heard those. I really like that Park West Arms SD10. I think it's the most elegant, slimmest, sleekest, beautiful falling block. But The old original was the Farquharson. There are a few quite similar to it, not real common. The most common is the Ruger #1, which is probably the most famous as well. Most people know it. And it's fairly reasonably priced compared to some of the others, but a little harder to find now because Ruger is concentrating on the American line of less expensive, more budget rifles, and they don't seem to be making as many #1s as they used to. And as I said earlier, Lipsy's distributor gets them to make a certain style and chambering for the year, and then they sell those out and they go get a different one the next year, and it's kind of fun to follow those. There are some guys who will collect them. Every year they'll get a different chambering and a new Ruger #1 and really get quite a collection going. So you can look for those, but over where you are in Sweden, I think you're going to mostly want to look at the single shot Kiplof type rifles from Merkel and Blaser and all of the European manufacturers. It seems like most of those will have a break action single shot. And I shot some of those that were, they were well balanced, really well made and solid. And you can get a longer barrel in a single shot like that because the actions are so short. You don't have a long bolt that has to have an action on it. And you're looking at 3 to 4 inches of action just to close the cartridge in the chamber. You just simply snap the gun closed and your chamber's right up against the fence or the back of the breech. So you can then have a 2 or 3 inch longer barrel and your overall rifle length is the same as if you had a shorter barreled bolt action. So it's kind of fun there. You can get your velocities up without extra weight and length. So take a look at some of those break actions, and I think that's what you'll want to consider. All right, so thank you, Marcus and James and Stefan and David and Bruce and George. Really appreciate that. Everyone else who wrote in, we have to pick now our comment of the week and see who is our winner, and that will be... And we're ringing in this week's comment of the week, and it's by James, who asked about conservation and getting closer to animals and stalking and all these. I like those kinds of questions because much as I focus on cartridges and ballistics and rifles and such, really the interest for me starts with the resource, the hunting, the wildlife, and how we manage it. And James, I thank you for bringing that up because that really is the heart and soul of what we do here. And that makes you our commenter of the week. By the way, guys, these bells I've been ringing, I want to explain what these are. These are made by a friend of mine who is a sculptor, and he was a welder, worked for years doing the blue collar welding stuff. And he found that if he cut some of these oxygen tanks off and acetylene tanks and such, they had a remarkable ring to them. So he started hanging them on different pieces of scrap metal and things. And his idea was to recycle all the scrap steel that he saw around the place where he was working. And then his wife is an artist, a typical two-dimensional painter style artist, who inspired him and said, why don't you fancy them up a little bit? So he started fancying them up. And then he learned to make really cool finishes like these and putting them together using recycled scrap iron. And the guy is a veteran and he likes the Second Amendment. He's really big on it. He loves to shoot and hunt like most of us. So he started making Second Amendment bells. And this is an example of one. They're all one-off pieces. And he has me shoot groups into the steel plates, and then he builds around it. So it's kind of fun. We're calling them the Second Amendment Freedom Bells. And, of course, let freedom ring. I say it's kind of like an echo of the old Liberty Bell. And Doug Adams is the artist. He puts his little A on the back of the bells to sign them. And he wants me to sign these too because I've shot them. He says, Ron, you ought to sign those and then we'll put them up for sale. Now, Doug normally sells these at a number of galleries around the country and he sells them by the dozens. I mean, they really fly off the shelves there. They're not exactly cheap, but they are something special. And if you're interested in picking one up like this, Doug and I are doing these limited edition where I shoot the plates. They're Second Amendment Freedom Bells, as I said. But if you've got somebody hard to buy for on your list, Father's Day or Christmas or anything, you're looking for a unique gift, We've got a whole bunch of these. They're going to be on Ron Spomer Outdoors store on ronspomeroutdoors.com, our website. You might go in there and check them out. We'll put some pictures of them up. He uses, as you can see, here's a piece of a railroad spike, and he'll use pieces of old farm equipment and cars and crankshafts, and he'll incorporate things like these deer antlers and then stones and rocks that have some kind of special meaning. And his wife, I've got to get a flashlight and show you this. His wife specializes in this colored glass. Look at that. She'll find a piece of glass and he'll incorporate that into this thing too. Sometimes he'll put in bits of flags and things. So you just want to check them out. We're going to continue to ring one of these on every one of our podcasts for the comment of the week. And yeah, those are the Freedom Bells. Hope you guys like them. Write in and let me know what you think. And we'll show you some different ones if we can get some more up here from Doug. All right. Once again, I want to thank all of our patrons for their support. I really appreciate that, guys. And it's always fun to respond to you guys. We get quite the conversations going here sometimes. And it seems like I give you some pretty good ideas on cartridges and rifles. And then every once in a while, you guys give me some pretty good ones too. And I always appreciate that. So keep it up. If you'd like to join us on Patreon, just go to patreon.com, Ron Spomer Outdoors, and all the information is there for you to join us. Until next time, this is Ron Spomer on Honest and Shoot Straight.